please welcome to us, or welcome back, Mr. Tim Wallace.
What I want to talk to you today about are 10 things that I find that entrepreneurs have to focus on to really be successful. He gave you a little bit of my background. iPipeline is my 8th company. I've taken one public. It was very successful. It was actually the second most successful IPO on the NASDAQ that year. I've taken one into bankruptcy. It was a pretty thing, but I've actually failed at one. But all told, I've monetized now about $1 billion for my investment group, which is pretty successful in and of itself. But I didn't do it by myself. And we're going to talk about things that will help you be successful if you really decide you want to be an entrepreneur. This is meant to be interactive, so if you've got a question while I'm talking, just please yell it out. You know, you're here to learn something. I'm here to give something back. So please, anything that's on your mind, bring it up. The first thing I want to share with you, people ask me, Tim, how do you build a company? How do you take a company from 30 people to 2,026 locations in 6 years? The key critical factor of any great entrepreneur, any of them, is they have a passion and a vision for what they're trying to accomplish, and they can communicate that to the people that are around them. So as you look out in your lifetime over the next 5 or 10 years, and you really think about starting a business, the first thing that I would challenge you to think about is, what do you want it to be, and what do you want it to look like 5 years from now? I had a great call out of the blue yesterday. A kid from Silicon Valley called me. I'll call my friend Chang. Probably one of the smartest guys I've ever talked to on a telephone. He has Harvard MBA, a PhD from Stanford, and he did his undergraduate work at CMU. And he called me up and he said, I really need some mentoring advice. I know you don't know me, but can I talk to you? I said, sure. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I went to get married 2.5 years ago, and I'm a math guy, so over a weekend I really cranked out this very complex algorithm that lets you make decisions faster and more efficiently. I said, okay, what's that got to do with this phone call? He said, well, I'm trying to build a business around it. Actually, I'm trying to build it in the insurance industry. You've got to do pretty well. Could you give me some advice? I said, I don't know. So I would go out to his website, and he has 2 websites. And it's called WiseView. It was one at the .NET site and one at the .org site. So I look at the .NET site, I have no idea what this thing does. I play with it for 15 minutes. Then I go to the .org site, and I have no idea what he's trying to accomplish over there. So I said to him, my friend Chang, what is your vision? What are you trying to do here? How long have you been at it? He said, I've been doing this for 3 years. I said, how many employees do you have? He says, just me. I said, well, if you're going to build something, you have to figure out what you want to build and how you want to build it. And for the next half hour, he tried to explain to me how his algorithms were better than Google and Netflix. And I finally said, my friend, hey, I said, you don't get it. You have to decide where you want to take something. So it's absolutely critical as you think about what you want to do from a business standpoint. Think about the vision, the passion that you can create around an idea to take to the marketplace. The second biggest mistake I see made with young entrepreneurs all the time. Let me ask you, how many people in this room have ADD? I can be honest, I have ADD bad. I can't even concentrate and pay attention to things at all. On the other hand, because I have ADD, when I do focus, I probably am able to focus at a higher level than most people are, to the point that if I'm focused doing something and somebody walks into my office and they scare the living shit out of me, because I'm just in the zone. But if you're going to build a company and you're going to build something that's successful, the hardest thing to do is maintain that focus, especially if you're an entrepreneur, because your characteristics are that you see a lot of different things, you come up with a lot of different ideas, you want to go down that path before you develop this path. So one of the key things that you have to sit down and say to yourself is, how am I going to maintain my focus? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. But if you don't do it, some people want to write 40-page business plans. I can't write a 40-page business plan. Mine are typically 1 page and about 6 bullet points. But I look at those 6 bullet points every single day, and I have to remind myself constantly not to go this direction and that direction, to stay focused and to execute on what I'm trying to do in the marketplace. So as you think about building a business, and you create this idea of what you want to do, where you think you can take it, the next thing you have to say to yourself is, okay, from a focus standpoint, how do I get there? Because you've got to take those key critical steps to move this thing forward. The other most important thing is there a market for what you're trying to do? I shared this story earlier. My $121 million failure, which was very, very painful. We probably built the most complex piece of software that solved one of the biggest problems in enterprise large corporations in the world at the time. Gartner rated us off the charts, #1, far right top of the rating system. And what we did was we took master data and basically consolidated it in very large organizations. That problem still exists today. Well, I made two major mistakes. I thought I could beat IBM and SAP. We were Lemonade, stand 35 people, doing a couple million in revenue. But when you're trying to sell a $5 million software product to Procter & Gamble or US Steel, and you're 35 people, and you're talking about consolidating probably the biggest asset that companies have, it was just a challenge. And it was a signal that we should have understood much, much earlier in the development of that product cycle. So even though we built a great product and there was a market out there, the market wasn't accepting of our company and our technology platform. You can look at any product, think about anything that you want to do in the marketplace, and there's a market. But what you have to ask yourself is, based upon your vision, your focus, what you want to build, is it going to support the organization that you look to and want to drive to from a business standpoint? It's a tough question to answer sometimes. Sometimes you've got to go out there and test it. Sometimes you've got to go out there and pay for help to get market analysis and data around it. Sometimes you just know it in your gut that this is a great market opportunity and that you'll be able to grow very, very quickly. And then other markets, you're going to have to say to yourself, okay, listen, if I can get my company to $1 million, is that going to fulfill me? Is that something that's important to me? Do I want to build a $10 million organization, a $50 million, $100 million, $200 million? And you have to understand what your vision is, where you want to take your company and your goals, and how you get there. But please focus on what the market and the demand for what you're trying to sell into the marketplace is going to be. And it's hard sometimes to get your hands around that. But test it. Test it with your friends. You know, one of the greatest things about social networking today is if you take a look at people typically on Facebook that are between 21 and 30, when they make a purchasing decision, they typically interact with 65 people on Facebook. So that they're getting feedback from their friends, their trusted advisor, before they buy a car, before they buy a house, before they do anything that requires a large expenditure. Well, that's great marketing data. You have at your fingertips, quite frankly, the world today. So when you think about how do you define markets, how do you figure out what they are, Facebook is probably one of the most viral marketing tools that you have at your disposal. By the way, it's free, it's accessible, and it gives you great, great information. The other one that I'll tell you that you'll start to get involved with if you haven't done yet is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is really the Facebook of the business world to some extent. And I see those two merging over time. I don't know lately or how that's doing, but functionality-wise, as Facebook constituents become older, I think you'll see more of the business world moving there much, much faster than it has thus far. So again, try to figure out how to get your hands around markets. This is one of my favorite things that I tell people all the time. Google, Apple, Microsoft, any major corporation you can think of, they probably haven't invented anything. I mean, with the exception of the iPad, Apple hasn't invented anything. They've taken an existing product and an existing idea and they made it better. They did it with the Mac. They did it with the cell phone. They did it with the iPad, which is an extension of a mobile device. Google. There were search engines out there way before Google came along. Now they built a better mousetrap. They figured out how to take that data, mine it better, get better information to the person that was doing the searches quicker. So if you think about your vision, think about the fact that all you really have to do if you want to be an entrepreneur, find something you're passionate about, something that excites you, something that you can build a business around, and do it better than the other guy. I mean, think about all the restaurants that open on an annual basis. Chipotle. Chipotle's the fact, is that pronounced wrong? I've never been. Chipotle, whatever. I've never been there, but it's the fastest growing restaurant in the United States. They have knocked the cover off it. And it's Mexican food. Mexican food's been around for years. But they figured out a model that the consumers love, and it's about being fresh content, quick, easy, and good, in a very clean environment. And that restaurant has broken growth charts for the last 5 years, and it's been one of the most successful stocks on Wall Street. Again, they didn't invent anything new. They built a better mousetrap. When you look at most businesses today, it's all about building a better mousetrap. So again, think about your vision, your passion, your focus, what the market is, and then how do you build something that's better than the competition. I know when I was 22, I knew everything. I swear to God, you come out of school, you have a passion for things, you excel at what you're doing. But as you become an entrepreneur, it is absolutely critical that you find advisors and mentors. And don't be afraid to be aggressive and reach out and reach for the stars, because most of the people that have been very successful that can help you make time in their day to help younger people be successful. I probably mentor on a calendar year basis 30 people. In some very structured formats, and in some just phone calls like I had yesterday that will probably result in another phone call next week and a meeting later on. But you're going to need help with accountants, lawyers, financial people. And there's no reason to learn these things the hard way. People like myself are here to help you, to guide you and to give you clear advice on how to become successful and not make the mistakes that we all make. So as you look around you, especially your families, your parents, start to think, if you're really going to start a business, okay, who do I know, or who does my parents know, or my uncle or my aunt that might be able to help me on the financial side? Where am I going to find a good attorney? And unfortunately, I hate to tell you this, in today's business environment, I don't care what you're doing, you're going to be exposed to attorneys. You're going to need them to incorporate documents, you're going to need them to review lease agreements and legal agreements. So you're going to need to find one. And they can be really expensive. So you really want to find one that you can work with and find one that charges reasonable rates. Talk to other entrepreneurs. When you leave this university, you're going to be exposed to a lot of different entrepreneurial groups that exist in the marketplaces. Every major city in the United States has a high technology council or some type of group whereby, whether I'm in Boston or Philadelphia or Tampa, the technology entrepreneurs get together and they meet and they talk and they share ideas, experiences, etc. Those same groups exist for every industry out there. So find out which one is around the area that you want to pursue and go join them and learn from the people that are doing things there. They can also help point you to these advisors, and they will help you clarify what you want to do, how you want to do it, and really point you in directions when you need directions, which you will often do. I mean, when you start a company, right out of college, you're going to have a lot of questions because there's a lot in the marketplace that you just haven't been exposed to, and people that have built other companies will help you. We're out there, we love to do it, and it's fun for us. Then the next question becomes is how do you do this? We started our first company, my brother and I, with $5,000 out of my garage, or our garage. This is a true story. He was working for Alcoa, I was working for Arthur Anderson. He drew the lucky straw, so he got to stay home and play with the computers, and I had to continue to work and plow money back into the company. And that's how we started our very first company. $5,000 out of savings, and then I continued to work, and most of my income was split between us so that he could start and fund our company. You need cash, you need capital, you need access to credit. Companies operate on a cash flow system. So if you think about starting a business, you have to sit there and say, okay, listen, how's this thing going to work? How am I going to bill my customers? How fast can I get that cash in? What are my cash outlays going to be? If you're building something where you have access to venture capitalists, you need to understand that market very significantly, or you can waste a tremendous amount of your time trying to raise money. You need to understand from a venture capitalist standpoint what that fund does from an investment standpoint. What's their profile? How much money are they willing to give you? And most entrepreneurs that I see go to the capital markets don't have a clue about how to raise money, and they will literally waste cycle times of 1 to 2 years, and they could have found these answers out in 2 weeks if they would have did it the right way. They would have known ideally right away whether or not even to make a sales call on one of these VCs, because they would know from the profiling of that venture capital whether or not they'd be willing to give them money. So it's important to understand the capital marketplaces. You're going to need a banker, whether it's a banker just to run your checking account through. You're going to need it for payroll. You're going to need it for payroll taxes. And you're going to need to understand from a MasterCard standpoint how you want to collect funds if you're dealing with the business to consumer marketplace, and how fast and what that is going to cost you from a commission standpoint. As you grow the business, depending upon your level of growth, this can become a chess game. I mean, literally, you could be growing so fast and adding expenses so fast. If you can't keep up with the cash requirements to fund your business, you will do serious damage to not only your reputation with your customers, but also your employees. There's nothing worse than not being able to hit payroll. I mean, it's absolutely kind of the death of a business, because your employees lose all credibility with you. So you've got to think about how am I going to make this work from a cash standpoint? Where's the money coming from? You know, how does it come in? Very, very important as you grow this business is where do you get the cash? How do you keep it flowing? And where it comes from. I'm going to talk very quickly about 2 other things, and one of them is growth. You don't start a business not to grow it. So if you think you're going to start a business and just, have 4 employees or something, I tell you that you're probably going to be pretty frustrated for that relationship. Most businesses you start because you have that vision, you want to build something, and now you start it, how do you get out there and grow it? And growth comes in a lot of different ways, but the number one thing, I live my life by this, I can fix anything with more sales and ducting. Revenue fixes anything, and I fix everything else in the office with ducting. But if you don't have revenue, you don't have a business. And if you don't grow your revenue, you don't grow the company. So getting back to all the points that we've already talked about, it all leads up to the standpoint is, how am I going to grow this company? And the hardest part, I will tell you, in any business, is the sales engine. Figuring out the sales engine is the hardest part about running a business as an entrepreneur. You're going to start this, it's all going to rest on your shoulders. You think you're going to be able to do everything, but at some point in time, you can't do everything. And if you want to grow, you got to figure out how to replicate the sales process. How you bring professionals in, how you compensate them, how you incent them. And it is by far the hardest part to get right. Because every single business is different, every industry is different. Even if you're on the internet selling products, how are you going to sell them? How are you going to market yourself? So it may not be the direct sales from a person-to-person standpoint, but even if you go the electronic route, how do you reach that customer, define your value proposition, and get them to buy? And this, I can tell you, of any business and every business that I've run, it's the hardest part to get right. The good news is when you get it right, you don't have to worry about growth. It just comes at you faster than you can figure it out. And that's a great position to be in, because then you don't have to worry about cash, because you've got more money coming at you than you can deal with. And you don't have to worry about your employees, because you can reward them, you can incent them, you can keep them happy. So think about the growth side, the revenue engine, and sales. You know, it was funny, when I went to college, I don't even remember taking a sales course. I took a marketing course. I took a lot of other courses. I didn't have one sales course in college or in graduate school, in an MBA program. And I'll tell you, it is the most important piece of the puzzle. And it's the hardest one to get right. The good news is, if you get it right, it makes everything else seem simple in comparison. as you start growing these companies, one of the things that really changes as you mature as an entrepreneur, you have to build process and structure around an organization. One of the fastest companies I ever grew, I mentioned we took from 40 people to 2,000, and we opened up 26 offices in 6 years. Well, if you can't replicate something and build process and structure around it, we could have never done that. And it took a lot of planning, it took a lot of development of cookie cutter cookbooks, as I like to call them, methodologies, HR manuals, instructions, in order to be able to go in and open up a city and get it running literally within a 2-week time frame. I don't care if you have one location, I don't care if you have 26. As you grow and as this organization scales, you have to put structure and process into this. This is really hard to do if you're a hardcore entrepreneur because you hate details, you hate structure, you hate process, but yet the rest of the organization will collapse around you if you don't build these things. So it's really critical to think about, okay, if I'm going to, all of a sudden this starts coming at me, you will collapse if you don't put an organization and a structure behind you to support the growth. And this is the hardest thing for entrepreneurs to do. I've seen more technology companies especially get to 5 or 10 million that literally just fall apart. And it's because the entrepreneur did not know how to scale the company. They should have gone and gotten help, their investors should have helped them. But it's something that you have to think about very, very proactively, because if the growth comes quick and you haven't built the structure, it'll break really fast. And you'll never get to that next level, because when it breaks, what you've done primarily is alienate your customer because you're not keeping up with the demand they look for in dealing with your company and your organization. The other thing that happens is we're all people. We all have egos. We have a tough time playing in the same sandbox a lot of times. But if you're going to be successful as an organization, much like the NFL championship team or the NBA championship team, you've got to build a team. And you've got to build a team that I like to say gels and really understands collaboration and having each other's back. And this is hard. I mean, this is, I can tell you, next to sales, it's the second hardest component, is getting a lot of top performers in an organization all to work together without a lot of the banter and jealousy and other issues that we as individuals have. Be prepared for it. It's going to happen. You're going to have people, if you start a company with 5, you'll get to 10, you'll have 2 or 3 people that will not work together. And you're going to have to make hard decisions, and I would really recommend when dealing with people, you make them fast. Because my experience has been that if people aren't getting along, they're never going to get along. And you have to decide which one you want to keep for the better of the organization and get the other one out of there. Do it professionally, do it nicely, help them. I've always said I've never fired anybody, I just counseled them out of my organizations. My terminology. But I've done it. I mean, when I have a lot of empathy for people because I believe that made me successful, and I'm trying to make them successful. That's part of my job as a leader, is to look at my organization, look at my people, and say, how can I take them to the next level of their career? But teamwork is something, if you get it right, your organization's going to gel and you'll do things really, really well together. The other thing that you'll find out, a lot of entrepreneurs start with a partner. Very, very common. And it can be very, very successful. Harvard did a study, and the most successful partners in organizations typically have what they call an inside guy and an outside guy. And literally, if you look at Apple, if you look at Microsoft, and I always use technology examples because that's where I grew up at, they had Bill Gates was the outside guy. Ballmer was the inside guy. Steve Jobs was the outside guy. Wozniak was the inside guy. So they did this study and they found out that, hey, most businesses really do operate very well with partners. But those partners better be one inside and one outside. When they're both inside and they're both outside, the failure rate's off the charts. So if you decide after you graduate that you're going to start a business, it's not uncommon that you're going to start it with a friend, a business acquaintance, or somebody, because it's just easier to build your confidence that way. Think about what I just told you, because I'll tell you, if you're not aligned that way, you probably won't be successful.
Wait, what do you mean inside and outside? Like opposites, like they work better together? Or?
One guy focuses more on the external marketplace, sales, marketing. He's typically very entertained with the customers, and he wants to be outside of the office. The inside guy basically sits and runs the accounting department, the payroll, the finance, worries about HR, he worries about all that infrastructure and process stuff that I talked about. And he never leaves the building. I mean, he's basically there to run the operational aspects of the company. So that's the inside guy, the outside guy. But literally, it's a phenomenal study, and it really is enlightening because you have some huge corporations in America over the past 30 years that really were built by two partners. But the ones that were really, really successful were the ones that had the inside-outside model. Most entrepreneurs that I meet that are young, there's almost always a partnership. I see very few single entrepreneurs start a company and literally drive it by themselves. 80% of the time they have a partner. That's just because of economics, because of they're trying it for the first time, they want to pair it with somebody else, and the relationship forms. So think about that. It's very, very common, but if you do it, focus on inside, outside, and I guarantee you'll be more successful. My last slide, which I screwed up, and I want to conclude with, and then I'll take questions, is about timing. There is no better time to start a business than when you graduate from college. It is absolutely the perfect time, and primarily because of what I call low overhead. You haven't made big money yet. You don't know what big money can do to you. You're not out there living a lifestyle that needs supported, making $70,000 or $80,000 a year. You're basically broke. You can live off your parents for a while if you have to, and you don't have any overhead. So my counsel to you, if you're serious about being an entrepreneur, start thinking about in June of whatever year you graduate, what business you're starting that summer and how you're going to start it. It's the best time in the world. Don't worry that you don't know anything. It doesn't matter. God, I learned so many things the hard way. It was ridiculous, and by the way, it was great schooling. It's also a lot of fun. It's one time in your life where you really don't have to worry about buying a house yet, having children. You've got a 5-year window, as I like to say, before you necessarily have to get really serious about the world. Take that 5 years and go experiment. Seriously, if I could leave you with one thought today, is start thinking about what business you're starting in July, the month after you graduate. How you're going to do it, focus on the 10 things, start planning for it. Because it's the best time in the world. The other thing is you've got the worst economy that we've looked at for probably 20 years. And I think 50% of most college kids graduating, at least out in the East Coast, are still unemployed. So there's a lot of young people looking for jobs and opportunities. Now that may seem higher or lower, I don't know what the economics are around Cincinnati. But literally 50% of college kids today coming out of college do not have a job. Well, my counsel to you is think about starting a company. It's the best time in the world to do it. And it is not hard to build a better mousetrap. It's talking and thinking about the customer. I'm a big believer in if you look at building a company from the customer backwards, you will always be successful. One of my biggest challenges is because we develop software, is when I walk into a company and I find out my software developers aren't talking to the customers. And there are organizations that I walked into iPipeline that these people called business analysts. And they were the people that talked to the customers and interpreted what the customer told them and then told it to the developers. Well, it's like me telling you a story. By the time he hears it through this path, the whole story's changed. you got to talk to your customers. We launched 5 new products in our company last year, which is unheard of in our industry. And it wasn't like a light bulb went off. I just went on and talked to the customers, and they said, Tim, you're doing a great job with this, but we could really use this, we could use that, and we could use this. And when you talk to 10 of them, and they all tell you the same thing, you know if you build it, the market's there. You know you've got an organization that can scale it. Go sell it. So you should think about timing. You think about your idea, crystallize your vision, think about all these things we talked about today. Think about who your customers are potentially going to be, and go test your theories with them. Talk to them, see what they would want to do. And I don't care if you're talking about opening an ice cream stand, building software, deciding you're going to build the best, drill press in the world. Find out what the market's there by talking to the customers first. They will tell you and share with you things that you just can't believe. So those were the 10 thoughts that I wanted to share with you. They have served me tremendously well in my career, and I just wanted to pass those along to you. So with that, I'd love to open it up for some general Q&A if I could.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and open it up. We've got about 20 minutes, so we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. And Tim, if you just want to moderate from there, that'll work out.
Sure.
Okay, my first question is, if you're, I was actually going to ask you how or what time it is to start this. You answered my question in that. But if you are graduating and you're interviewing for jobs, so you're not really thinking about starting that business right away, what would you say is the best way to incorporate your entrepreneurial spirit to the person you're interviewing with? Because it's obviously you don't want to walk in there and they say, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years? Oh, I'm running my own company. They might not. They're going to be like, okay, well, we're looking to hire you to do this job, so why would we want someone that's, do you know what I'm saying?
Here's my counsel to you. Go work for a startup. Don't go work for a big company. Go work for a startup. I've had 140 people in the last 18 months. And one of my mandates is I want kids right out of college. And the reason I want kids out of college is, one, you don't come with a lot of learned traits that I can't change. You come with a very creative mind. You come right out of an educational facility that you don't know what you don't know yet. And I love that. I love the energy. So if that's your thought process, I would just share with you, go find a startup in your industry and interview with them. By the way, that's where the jobs are right now, for the most part anyway. They're with companies like mine that are growing real fast. And really, we're making up the largest portion of new jobs in the marketplace. I think we had 130,000 jobs last month in the United States. 60% of them came from small businesses. So go work for, plus you'll learn. You'll get real life of what's going on. And you'll be exposed to so much more. My son just graduated from college. And he is working in New York City for a company that has 12 people. And first of all, he's an English major and wants to be a writer, so him going to work, period, was kind of a revelation to me. But he called me after the first week, and I said, how's it going? He says, I have no idea what these people do. And this is an internet company that does data mining, and very sophisticated data mining. He said, these people are so freaking smart, Dad. I'm learning so much. I said, well, keep learning. Figure out what you learn from there and how you take it to your own experiences when you want to start something on your own. So it's a great question, and that would be my counsel for you.
About the timing thing, I agree with you. Coming out of college, best time to start a company. But how many people are going to trust teen kids coming out of college?
Oh, you'd be surprised. It happens every day. I mean, when my brother and I started our business, we were 21 years old, 22 years old, and we were selling to Fortune 50 companies. You'd be surprised that those companies, remember, you're selling to people. Forget about the logo on the door. People buy from people they like. And I can't tell you how much I love seeing a young person come into my office trying to sell me something, and they own the company. That just fires me all up, right? Because I know they're trying to do something on their own. So I would tell you, don't worry about it. You'll be actually very, very surprised at how receptive people will be to the fact that you're trying to do something on your own. And they'll actually bend over probably to help you more than you might think. I know I will. and I know other people just like me. And I know when I started our first company, we were 22, 23 years old, and I can remember meeting with Henry Hillman. You probably don't know who Henry Hillman is, but Henry Hillman was probably one of the 10 richest guys in the United States. At the point in time we were back in Pittsburgh, he was probably the richest guy in the United States. Probably worth $25 billion at the time. And my brother and I went to meet with him, and we sold him a computer system. So I'm just telling you, it's out there. People will be receptive to the fact that you're young, you're trying to do something that's actually in your advantage. Great question, though.
I have another question. This is like
You bet,
unrelated.
made you want.
This is unrelated, but I'm just curious, like the name iPipeline. A lot of times these days, I feel like I see companies that aren't Apple using the like lowercase I. Can you like elaborate on why you guys chose that? And I'm not saying that in a negative way.
No, I think
Because like it is like obviously initially associated, we at least think it's associated with Apple.
yeah. The company's original name was Internet Pipeline. It was founded in 1995. And when the .com came along and burst, they thought it was in their best interest to get rid of the word Internet and just make it iPipeline.
Okay.
And that's the real true
Okay.
story. I'll tell you I shared this story with these guys. My last company was called Full Tilt. And I owned fulltilt.com URL. So around, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, we started seeing hits on our server going through the frickin' roof. And we don't know what's going on. We're thinking, hey, we must be selling something. We must be getting really good in the marketplace. And we were at Full Tilt Poker. So we finally figured out it's Full Tilt Poker, and I'm thinking, okay, this is good. I can make money off this. Well, the problem is you can't. Because under internet law, whoever drives the traffic owns the traffic. So even if I wanted to put fulltilt.com and then put a click-through over to their poker site and charge them 25 cents or 50 cents for every click, legally you weren't allowed to do that. I said, oh, that sucks. So they said, okay, I got a better idea. I'll go on and sell this URL to their competitor. They'll pay me way too much money to have that traffic come to them. Then I'll click through and get their poker site. They weren't allowed to do that either. So finally, I went on to their poker site and I typed a note to them and said, hey, listen, this is Tim Wallace. I'm the CEO of Full Tilt. I own your URL. It's actually my URL, but you're screwing up my business. Please call me. So the general counsel calls me, and I had done all this analysis. I thought it was really smart. And I said, I'll sell you that URL for $2.5 million. He said, I'll buy it for $25,000. I said, boy, that sucks. Well, we ended up at $500,000. But the only reason I relayed this story was if you've seen the paper recently, Full Tilt Poker started this whole Ponzi scheme. These guys are now in jail. And I'm sitting there worried about credit law in the United States, which basically says if a company goes bankrupt, they can go back to all the people they paid money to for the last 2 years and collect it back. So I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, how long ago was this? Do I have to write a check for $500,000 because these guys stole all this money? I've been told I'm okay. I just thought I'd share this story. I could share a lot of other ones, but that's one of the funny ones. Other questions?
When you were starting out with you and your brother, when you went to go build your board of advisors, who did you turn to first? What was that experience like for you?
It was funny because my dad was a blue-collar worker, and my mom was a stay-at-home housewife, so I didn't have a network with my parents where we could go out in the marketplace and say, my dad didn't know what an accountant was, or he didn't know what a lawyer was, or he knew what they were, or we never used one. We really found it through like the technology councils, the networking groups that we were able to join within the Pittsburgh marketplace. That's where we started our first company. And as a result of that, we got exposed to people like I would be right now in my career. And like I said, they go to these groups to help. I mean, I am very active in the Philadelphia technology community. Like I said, I mentor probably 30 people a year, both formally and informally. And people are very receptive about helping. You'll be shocked. I mean, if you haven't experienced this, you will be absolutely shocked at how much free advice that you can get. And then at some point, depending upon how big your company gets, again, go back to growth and scalability, you end up with situations where most of my companies now have formal boards of directors. I actually pay my directors. I sit on boards that I get paid to sit on. I get paid quite well when I sit on them. So again, it's kind of like being a consultant at that point. But I'm always trying to give something back to people your age that want to try to do this, because I think it is the most rewarding thing that you can do in your life. You'll be happy, you'll be passionate, and you'll have fun. There's only been one company that I ran that I just wanted to put a bullet in my head, and it was the one we failed at. And it was the worst experience of my life, and when I look back at it, I would have just sold it or shut it down much earlier than I did. But you learn from that. I can tell you, iPipeline, I'm having more fun now than I've had in 20 years. We're having a blast. And the people that work for us are having a blast. We've got a great culture. And we're building from the customer backwards. We're doing everything right, and it shows. I mean, we've literally grown from 5 million to 50 million in 30 months. And we think we can get this thing up to a couple $100 million.
I'd just be interested in hearing sort of how you got started learning about all these 10 different points. You know, part of those obviously by experience, but sort of can you relate how you got that information, and how do you think we can access that information today in a completely different sort of world?
Some of it came through the school Hard Knocks. Some of it came through formal education. I did spend the first 10 years of my career at one of the largest consulting organizations at the time, Arthur Andersen, in their consulting division, which is now Andersen Consulting. And lastly, I'll tell you, I'm a vivacious reader. I read 2 to 3 books a week. There's probably not a business book out there that I haven't read. Most of them I read really quick because I'm kind of redundant after a while. But I also look at other companies and study why they're successful. It absolutely drives me crazy when I look at how successful Apple has been over the last 5 years, to the point where I'm envious. I mean, what they did has just been incredible. But what drives me more crazy is to look at Microsoft, who outspends Apple $10 to $1 on R&D, and how they haven't kept up competitively in the industry. So I would tell you to broaden your horizons, read a lot, talk to a lot of people, and ask questions. I think the hardest thing for young people today is to ask questions. You can learn so much by talking to somebody. But ask questions and don't talk. Listen to what they can tell you.
What do you love so much about iPipeline? What keeps you passionate?
The fact that our customers, this is on a true story. The very first week I was there, we raised $18 million. We bought the company. We did an acquisition on the day we closed. And the second week I flew down to AIG, which I'm sure you've heard of in the press because they've been one of the insurance companies because they had a derivative division that got themselves into a lot of financial trouble. And this is literally 3 weeks before all the meltdown happened. AIG is still one of the largest life insurance companies in the world. I think they manage a portfolio of about $100 billion. I walked into a conference room on their 46th floor of their Houston headquarters, met with the CIO, the CEO, and their top 8 direct reports. And we were basically there because our project was failing. And we walked into the room, and I looked at the CEO and I said, listen, I just came on board, I've been here a week and a half. But I know one thing. We have the ball on the 20-yard line. We can get this thing done and wrapped up in a bow. Or quite frankly, I have never been sued in my entire career. If you want your money back, I'm here to write you a check. And that just like broke all the ice. And he sat down and literally pulled me out of the room. We left the rest of the meeting. He said, Tim, we need your help so bad we can't even see straight. And the reason this project's failing is not so much because of you guys, but because of us. And the story goes on from there. Every time I go out and meet with our customers, they are literally asking and begging us for help. Because it's an industry that historically, from a technology standpoint, is years behind the rest of the world in the adoption of that. So it just makes it so much fun that you're coming to work every day. Not only are you providing valuable services where your customers love it, but as you grow older and really understand the life insurance industry, life insurance is such an important product in the United States. And it drives me crazy because I have these discussions with the CEOs of life insurance companies. They are the worst marketers in the world. I'll share this is a real story. We've lost 3 executives in our neighborhood over the past probably 3 years. 50 to 52 years old, just dropped over dead. None of them had life insurance. It completely ruined their families' lives. They had to sell their houses. They had to pull their kids out of college because they had no money. This guy might have been making $300 grand a year, but when he died, that income went away. That family had nothing. So not only do I believe in helping the customers, I really believe in the product that my customers are selling in the marketplace. So that's why I'm passionate about it. And they need so much help. It's so much fun.
Why have you started 8 businesses, and do you think you're going to start more?
I will start more. What happens is I build them, somebody else has to buy them. We've had 6 offers, 7 offers on iPipeline this year. Last offer was about $175 million to sell the company. I'm not ready to sell it yet because I think I can make it worth more money. And that's what we've decided to do. But once it's sold, I'm not really good at working in front of people. I have really strong emotional feelings about the way I do things. And if I have to report to people, it just doesn't work. So I decided a long time ago, after I left Arthur Anderson, that I really wasn't a good employee, and that I better learn how to do this, because I wouldn't want to work with myself.
What does it look like for you? Like if a company or someone comes in and buys your company, what do you do next? Like once you sell it, how do you think of a new idea?
Well, it depends upon, first of all, contractually, I always have some sort of transition. So it could be anywhere from when I sold the one medical company, I literally left the day that we closed, and we had worked that into the purchase agreement. When I sold the company to Xerox, I had to stay 1 year. Depending upon who would buy this one, I might be able to walk out the door tomorrow. They may want me to continue to run it. But I would tell them I'm only staying for a transition period because I'm, like I said, I'm sure employee I'm going to work with. I get approached constantly because of my track record to take companies over. It's a lot easier to take a company that's already doing $5 million in revenue and to scale it. One of the reasons I've challenged you on timing to do this now, taking a company and starting it and getting it to a couple million in revenue is the hard part. I mean, it's hard. It is really freaking hard. But if you can get it to 2, 3, 4, 5 million, you got something that you can take to a whole other level. And like I said, it's hard for me to do that unless I want to put significant amounts of my personal wealth estate to do it, or I can find a VC that will back it. But I still don't want to do it at this point in my life. It's just the hardest work that you can do as an entrepreneur, because you're validating that market. You've got to establish the vision. You've got to find the customers. You've got to build the infrastructure, and it's putting it all together. Once you get it to 3, 4, 5 million, the market's saying, "Hey, you've got something here that's good." So I won't start one from scratch again. I'll take something that somebody started and help them take it to the next level. I'm going to do it by pipeline. Yes.
All right, so you're in a room and some team is sitting across from you and they're trying to get you to invest in their idea. What do they have to do to sell you to give them money?
That's a great question. Let me answer this not as Tim, but as professional investors would approach it. If you look, and this is especially true out in Silicon Valley, Boston, and New York, where the majority of raw ideas are funded with capital before there's even a business. And what those guys look for, and these are the guys that funded Yahoo and YouTube and Google before you ever even heard of them and they had any market share, because all of those companies got capital just based upon an idea. Those VCs understand the market dynamics very well, and they're looking for the idea that they think is a breakthrough. And if they feel that you have a breakthrough idea, they will fund it to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars. Now, if you've already started a business and you've got some traction, Again, it gets back to how the funding markets work. You're typically going to be dealing with maybe angel investors, which are prominent people in the marketplace like me that you would approach and say, hey, Tim, we're trying to raise $1 million. Would you throw $100,000 at this idea? Once you're kind of past that $1 million in revenue range, then you're looking at early stage VCs. And early stage VCs will typically fund anywhere from $1 million to $5 million. And then once you're over probably 5 or 6 million in revenue, you've established profitability, positive cash flow. You're into the second tier VCs, and they'll fund anywhere from 5 million to probably 20 million on an investment. And then once you get to the mature stage, unless you're planning on going public, you're probably starting to talk to private equity people, whereby there are billions of funds available for a company like us. If we didn't want to sell to a strategic buyer, somebody like a Xerox or an IBM or an Oracle, a private equity group would come in right now and they have and say, hey, Tim, we'll pay you and your investors $175 million, but we want you to stay around and take it to the next level. We'll continue to participate because we think we can turn over 175 into 350. So you go through stages, and it really depends upon where you're at. But they're going to, and at each stage, they're investing for different reasons. But at the startup stage, VCs will invest if they think it's a breakthrough idea that can go to $1 billion in revenue, like within a 5-year time frame. If not, then you're probably building something until you get it to $1 million. And if you really need money, you'll start talking angel investors. And then once you get to 4 to 5, you'll get the regular VCs. But it is a very hard process if you don't know how to do it and do it right. And that's why you need advisors so that you don't make those mistakes. Most of the time I've found, I've seen young entrepreneurs spend 2 years trying to raise money. And the reality is, VCs are kind of weird people. They won't tell you that you're not going to get money from anybody else. They'll just tell you you're not getting it from them. So rather than giving advice saying, hey, you're way too early in the marketplace to get money, that's a waste of all the time in the world. So that's why, getting back to the advisor points, if you've got a good advisor that's raised capital before, he can really help you through these processes. Yes?
Talking about cash and capital. If your vision consists of a recurring revenue company, and the vision ends and you sell that company and its contracts off to a larger company, is it wise to try to get involved with venture capitalists from the beginning, or are you better off just trying to make it alone?
If you can create a recurring revenue model right out of the chutes and have a high stick rate, theoretically I would argue that you're building a really cash flow oriented organization and you would never need VCs. And we're a perfect example. We have a 98% customer retention rate and 70% of my revenue is recurring every year. So it's just continuing to build and build. And we throw off 30% cash flow to the bottom line. So we're extremely profitable, extremely cash flow oriented. And if we didn't have VCs, I would have never brought them in. I mean, this is like a dream come true from a business model standpoint. We believe in 3 years we'll get $150 million in revenue and probably drop it about $60 million to the bottom line. Now, if I had to do over again, get rid of them, yeah, I definitely not use them. So if you can build recurring revenue and drop cash, I put that money in your pocket all day long, or just let it build until you sell it, and then it's all yours. Yeah, because they're going to dilute you. If you don't understand how VC works, when they invest in your company, you're giving up a lot on the ownership side.
Tim, we wanted to thank you. This was absolutely good.